Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Wisdom in the Best Books and Films, where we find bite-sized nuggets of truth and use them to become better people. This week, I am excited to talk about one of my favorite miniseries that has ever been made on TV. That is Horatio Hornblower, that was made in the early 2000s. I want to say maybe late 90s, early 2000s, as a mini-series of short TV movies that was done by the BBC, and it is actually one that is really difficult to find on like any streaming service. You can't find it. But if you look for Horatio Hornblower with Ioan Gruffudd, that's spelled funny, Ioan Gruffudd, is the actor that plays Horatio Hornblower. And you could find it at like a library a lot of the time, some universities. So you'll have to find like a DVD of it to watch it, but it is worth it. Or you can go buy the DVDs. This is a fantastic series. As usual, if you enjoy this episode, please leave a review on Apple or Spotify and share the show with others. Here is this week's episode, The Worth of a Promise. I have been dismayed at times when people justify breaking their word because it's not fun anymore. This applies equally to little things like promising our kids we will be at their t-ball game, to much bigger things like divorce or quitting a religion. Now, I understand there are tragic situations where the best answer may require us to remove ourselves from a dangerous situation, or where there is physical or emotional abuse. But most broken promises don't measure up to that benchmark. Often, justification could be as simple as, I had a work call come up and that was more important than the t-ball game. Or, I just don't love my spouse anymore. Or, I don't believe in a God who would let my cat die a painful death, etc. The thing these examples and many others have in common is that we made the promise when things were going well. Then, back out of it the minute it becomes a sacrifice. I'm not even sure if most people would consider their religion or their marriage as binding promises anymore, and I am sure that the number of people who understand how detrimental that missed t-ball game is for their kid is much lower than it should be. But when I got married, I swore with every ounce of honor that I have to stick with my spouse in good times and in bad. I was raised in my religion, but there was a time when I made the choice of my own free will to promise to my Heavenly Father that everything I have was His to use as He would. My time, my talents, my money, etc. That was not just while life was easy and things were going well, but when life is hard, and even when I question God's existence, or wonder what His plan could be that makes good out of this world full of wickedness. And every time I break a little promise to one of my kids, which I have done a few times, I show them a little bit that a promise isn't really as important to me as whatever else I am choosing, and I set them up to join the world in its less than inspiring behavior when it comes to a promise. One of my favorite TV miniseries ever made is Horatio Hornblower with Ioan Gruffudd as the titular character. It is a wonderful series for boys especially, showing what a man should be and filled with adventure. It follows the career of Horatio Hornblower from midshipman on an English ship in the early 1800s until later in his naval career. The third episode, The Duchess and the Devil, has Hornblower and his companions imprisoned in a Spanish prison. After many months in prison, there is a heavy storm, and Horatio sees a Spanish boat stuck in the reef near the prison. He begs permission from their jailers to go to the rescue of those trying to get to shore, giving his word of honor that he will return to his imprisonment if they succeed at saving those men at sea. They are able to save many, but as luck would have it, they are pushed out to sea by the storm and come upon a friendly English ship. Horatio asks permission from his superior aboard the English ship to return and keep his word, when he easily could have stayed and no one besides himself and the warden of that prison would have known. In the book Mr. Midshipman Hornblower, which is also fantastic, he debates the idea as follows, quote, And that was when the devil came to tempt Hornblower, as he took another sip of rum and water. The joy of being on a king's ship again was so keen as to be almost painful. To taste salt beef and biscuit again, and never again to taste beans and garbanzos. To have a ship's deck under his feet, to talk English, to be free, to be free. There was precious little chance of ever falling again into Spanish hands. Hornblower remembered with agonizing clarity the flat depression of captivity. All he had to do was not to say a word. He had only to keep silent for a day or two. But the devil did not tempt him long, only until he'd taken his next sip of rum and water. Then he thrust the devil behind him and met Chrome's eyes again. "I'm sorry, sir," he said. "What for?" "I am here on parole. I gave my word before I left the beach." "You did? That alters the case. You were within your rights, of course." The giving of parole by captive British officers was so usual as to excite no comment. "It was in the usual form, I suppose," went on Chrome, "that you would make no attempt to escape?" "Yes, sir." "Then what do you decide as a result?" Of course, Chrome could not attempt to influence a gentleman's decision on a matter as personal as a parole. "I must go back, sir," said Hornblower, "at the first opportunity." End quote. With that context, how easy would it have been for him to say, "Well, I didn't try to escape. The storm blew us providentially to friendly help." How easy to justify taking what he wanted, instead of what integrity demanded. Horatio Hornblower is an inspiration to those of us who want to be known as uncompromising in our honor, doing the right thing even where there is great personal sacrifice involved. Often we actually gain much more in the long run if we live that way. If you don't love your spouse, remember that love is a verb, and start loving them again. If you doubt God's existence, or you think you have a better plan, start doubting your doubts, and remember that everything you have is His. And if you have to miss some work to keep a promise to a child, learn to make better promises, and give up the work this time. Over time, the deep love for your spouse that comes from pushing through hard times will be more than worth it. The deep trust you gain for your God, as His plan becomes more clear, will be more than worth it. The respect and love your children gain for you through time will be more than worth it. Everything in life in the long run will be better if you make the worth of your promise something that people can count on. Did you enjoy this week's episode of Wisdom in the Best Books and Films? If so, I would ask you to please go and share with anyone that you can think of who may benefit from these topics. Discuss it at work, with friends, at church, anywhere where the opportunity feels natural and the topics would be helpful to others. I personally am not a huge self-promoter, and so the only way that this podcast will get to reach very many people at all is through the listeners. Please also share with me if anything that you've heard has been impactful in your life, or share with me any ideas that you may have of wisdom that you've gleaned from different books or films. Be happy to hear from you anytime, and I will respond to all emails. You can find information for how to contact me in the show notes. Hope to hear from you soon.